HUBs that provoke. This book is trying to air some of my views, perhaps uncommon and controversial, about a few issues that we constantly grapple with. All my observations may not be fully and unquestionably right, nor will they be a farce, and completely devoid of merit. Written by Roy T. James. Part 10. Chapter 57. Isn't this a good way to study? Why is learning a problem? Is there an easy way to study? These are some of the questions that crop up most often, and I have encountered many answers. Choosing an appropriate time to study, ensuring an environment conducive to learning, and presenting the matter in an easily comprehensible manner are only a few of the more popular ones. But strangely, the most significant factor in our understanding of things, our desire to know more of that thing, does not seem to have merited enough attention. Humans need not be told at all about what one wants to learn. We are well equipped to search and locate new and better ways of acquiring further information about whatever is of interest. Teaching, in fact, to such a person may at best provide that information in a structured manner, making the process of learning a bit easier and faster. Thus, the best form of study should begin by developing in students a natural inclination for whatever we would like the student to learn. That is because familiarizing the students with its popular and practical applications will make them eager to know more, for that will enable them to identify with the topic of study quite closely, as they are already aware of its utility, shortcomings experienced in its use, and possible areas of improvement. This will also offer them a chance to derive pleasure from involving profitably in societal transactions, where superior knowledge could be of significance. In this light, if we are to analyze the present pattern of learning, a couple of things stand out. What is most difficult to visualize? We are pouring down the throats of children, and what is the easiest part to link with daily life? We are giving to those already studied enough, on a platter. We know this is causing stress among students, and we have set up elaborate counselling arrangements as part of our teaching system. But we haven't thought about any change in our pattern of studies. In my student days we always used to wonder, those studying in higher classes are generally seen much relaxed. Now I know why. Take, for example, electricity. All the abstract ideas related to this subject, like potentials, energy levels, atomic structure, etc., are the ones that are taught to children in adolescence. A high degree of imagination is essential to visualize these precepts, which necessitates the students to be well aware of its practical applications at home, in the industry and elsewhere in our world. To take this into account, as the students are likely to be unaware of such usage, we resort to heavy investments in sophisticated learning aids combined with frequent visits to hospitals, factories, etc., where things can be appreciated in real use. Whereas, when it comes to the relatively attractive ideas connected with this, like the operation of complex mechanisms of daily use, these are reserved for those doing higher studies and research. Also, in this case, the actual equipment or system can be shown to the students while discussing the methods of its use, discounting the need for any other learning aid. Now suppose it was the other way. The young ones are taught about the use of the complex machinery of our daily life, at home, office, bank, etc., and those in the higher studies and research learned about the fundamental precepts. The young one would have been naturally attracted to learning, as they can easily identify the practical utility of those ideas with one's own life, and would have had a natural affinity to learn well and stand out easily, at all times. Whereas, when it comes to the abstract, fundamental ideas, those doing higher studies and research would have been already inclined to mastering these topics, having seen them in many of phenomenon that necessitated such precepts for greater erudition. Even without the need for considerable investment in complex learning aids, training would have completed successfully. Chapter 58. Why is human society never at peace? Why is human society never at peace? This was, even now is, the question that prompted me to start many of my books and most of my hubs. While exploring a particular case of upheaval, whatever reason I could find within the lingering discontent in the society was further examined in those writings. The most potent conclusion one could derive from this was this: the perennial discontent of the human race is a leftover from the post-mating drama of the animal world. Is that it? Why is that we are not able to realize the presence of something as natural as that? How exactly does it manifest while giving rise to such disturbances? Won't there be some additions to our life, both external and internal, that is causing this? If so, what are those? The answer, I thought, lies in the ways we put our faculties to use. In my search for an answer, I happened to recollect Peter's principle, that managers tend to rise to the level of their incompetence, and, eventually, all positions in an organization will come to be held by individuals who are incapable of fulfilling their roles. But, I think this has a more inclusive, rather universal, significance. Let us examine the way we put our faculties to use and how adequately each one meets its intended end. Take, for example, the way we take care of our children. We love them so greatly that they hardly get an opportunity to use their own faculties, even for essential things like standing up and walking. And our children have been growing up in this manner, to an age at which it is impossible for others to help them. This, we can easily see is true for all other dimensions of life, as well. Either because we don't happen to see, or because none of us want to acknowledge, the fact that newly born human offspring is totally incapable of looking after itself, escaped our attention. I think to make sure that none of us will ever think about those questions, we even perpetuate a scientific reason young ones of human species have of greater dependency. Though we say humans are intelligent, that I think is just a possibility, that too only when we assess some of our prepared actions or responses like our exploits in science and technology. On all other matters, we make it a point to choose the most irrational of the possibilities, often with a great excuse: these things are beyond the comprehension of man. The way we put our intelligence to use is a good example. Maximum use is towards finding fail-safe techniques of destroying ourselves. Assume that man has a desire to choose the irrational, since it is impossible to continue living if one is to go irrational on matters that are within the realm of the material. One grudgingly chooses to identify oneself as a rational being. At present we won't have a memory of this, having happened generations back. This regularly leads to conflict. A bunch of eventualities then follow, each one of those offering a fresh opportunity for observation, consideration, and reflection. The repercussions of this activity by the learned, when percolated down to the masses, result in a society which is in constant churning, giving rise to instances of unrest and violence. Another proof could be noticed if we are to compare the way we appreciate the present and the way we understand the past. A difference in approach can be easily noticed. We quite realistic and progressive in our actions, when it comes to anything to do with the present, but our appreciation of the past does not seem to have a clear direction. In some cases, we take sensible, quite rational steps in finding the roots of the problem, and in many cases, we blindly accept certain obscure, hazy ideas. Why this dichotomy? Isn't it arising out of the dormant discontent? Still another proof is the noticeable difference between the way we confront all that we share with other forms of life, and our approach to things specific to humans, like an abstraction. When it comes to the former, we are the epitomes of rational behavior, and our appreciation of issues like health, food, or shelter exemplifies this. But, as far as the latter is concerned, we are quite off the mark. One very striking example is extremism. We greatly rejoice, recognizing with awards and prizes, those who cross normal limits in many areas like science, arts, or other forms of entertainment. We should have been realizing that this would encourage extremism, and worry off some of those who cross limits to extremes of physical entertainments, resulting in violence. And, even when we are in search of a cure for violence, we are not able to find the link that exists between violence and our approach to things. Then this is nothing else but Peter's principle appropriated for life. As long as it was competent enough to face the travails of living one's life, each and every species continued to evolve, giving rise to newer and newer forms of life. With man, life is reaching the level of incompetence. No more evolution, but a lingering discontent, notable by its absence in all other forms of life, come to be a staple part of all humans. Chapter 59 Antipedia. The reverse encyclopedia. What is Antipedia? A compendium of what things are not. If you're searching for new facts for, or are trying to adopt a new concept, the information available all around in places like Wikipedia is not enough. For, though such sources are capable of providing adequate information when it comes to things outside of us, the essential data regarding its unsuitability is not sufficiently given, without which it is impossible to conduct any form of integration, however temporary. Some such arrangement, needless to say, is indispensable before we try out anything. Antipedia is envisaged as an exhaustive collection of data regarding how ineffective something is. Incorporating modern internet tools like a search engine and hyperlinks, it's designed to search for inabilities or limitations quickly. This will have a significant effect on the way we think and act. If we look at anything closely, much of our efforts are in fact used for correcting things we overlooked in our earlier attempts, or undoing the inappropriate things we happen to do. And that can change when we don't overlook things as a routine. To make Antipedia work, everyone has been empowered to edit it. You can view revision history, discuss the current state, or learn how to make changes yourself. This open, inclusive process is expected to make Antipedia quite user-friendly. To illustrate the likely final product, let us examine the Antipedia entry and its practical use for the well-known aphorism, "Unity is strength," specifically in relation to living objects, more so as it applies to humans. Antipedia will flag this proverb as something greatly harmful. Unity is strength. This aphorism needs to be re-examined. Let us start with a rather simpler form of life, a plant. Imagine we are growing a group of seeds. On germination, if we plant these suitably dispersed with the plentiful availability of essential needs like sunlight, water or other nutrients, the seeds shall grow into healthy plant sorties that provide a good yield. We know, otherwise, the lack of the basic needs shall cause the plant's growth to be stunted and shall give rise to unhealthy trees, greatly affecting the yield. Something similar happens when we approach the question of breeding and caring for farm animals too. The size of such farms, its location, physical composition as well as the techniques employed is guided by such principles. Here also, sufficient importance is ascribed to the provision of adequate free area or space for each animal to grow unhindered. Making arrangements for plentiful sunlight, fresh air and other natural amenities take a prime position. But when it comes to human life, we somehow are deviating from such examples of good logic. Not only that, the methods adopted to nurse human babies deviate from the sound techniques of our farms, but also the human parents are showing a clear affinity towards techniques and patterns that are restrictive in nature, even when those are detrimental to happy growth. We conveniently forget a fact. It is possible that our incorrect approach to nursing our children is what has caused human babies to be so dependent on the elderly for their survival, rather than feeling happy about it. As another facet of human uniqueness, we should have been searching for an answer. We search all sides of this proverb we could be aware of before we continued to adopt it in our life. We thus went on with "unity is strength" as a rational maxim, especially in human affairs. Why did we happen to adopt such a careless attitude? That too with no qualm of overlooking all its ill effects. There must have been a reason. Either unity enabled us in achieving something great, which we now know is not true, or it empowered us to delay or avoid something inconvenient, which we need to examine, and the need would have been urgent and unavoidable. However, had any information been readily available regarding the ill effects, not only that we would not have adopted this maxim, but also another more appropriate adage would have taken its place. Homo sapiens would have had a different life, perhaps all other beings too. In short, had something like Antipedia available with our forefathers, we would not have been facing most of the ills we faced, be of wars, pestilence, disease, or death, or the ignominy, which we, however, celebrate as humans. Jump ahead of correcting all the prior efforts at routine intervals. Chapter 60. Do nurture take precedence over nature? Nature vs nurture is an interesting contest, both the sides having huge stocks of supporting arguments. Either stance is taken liberally by many of us, both to justify whatever we want to, and to oppose what we do not like. I thought, if we examine a few cases of humans growing up under no influence of nurture, no proper upbringing, and to see what unique contribution nature could show, I found it impossible to find someone growing up with no influence of nature. Real-life stories. Let us first examine a few extraordinary stories relating to total lack of nurture. 1. Marina Chapman is an author of a popular book and currently lives in Bradford, England. She was in fact adopted by a group of capuchin monkeys, which are known to accept human children in their groups. The animals taught young Marina how to catch birds and rabbits with her bare hands, so she was able to survive and take care of herself. 2. Sidi Mohammed, who at the age of 5 or 6 he wandered off from his North African family to befriend ostriches. They took care of him, teaching him to run fast and sheltering him, which each extended a wing over him. At the age of 12, he was taken back to society and his parents by mounted ostrich hunters. He later married and had children. 3. An abandoned 1-year-old boy surrounded by 8 wild cats was found by Argentinian police in 2008. They found that the cats had been keeping the child alive during the harsh winter by constantly licking him and by staying on top of him, like a living blanket. 4. Andrei Tolstok was born with hearing and speaking deficiencies and happened to be abandoned in the remote areas of Siberia. He was adopted by a guard dog and was taught how to survive, like a guard dog. 5. Marcos Rodriguez Pantoja was reportedly sold to a hermetic goat herder at the age of 7 and had to live for 12 years in the wild with the wolves and other animals. He spent a lot of time trying to integrate into society and was only partly successful. What can we learn from this? Here it is important to note that all these children found it hard to integrate into society. For example, a boy of around 5 was found after spending about a year in the company of monkeys in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. In 1987, in 2005, at the age of 17, he was still a monkey. He didn't talk at all. He walked like a monkey, refused to eat cooked food and never played with other children, though still exhibited affection towards monkeys. Naturally so, since at the critical age in which human language and interactions are developed, after which it becomes a hard affair to develop such skills, these children never got a chance to be exposed to those. The much celebrated genetic characteristics, at least for these children, seem to have had no effect. My question is, isn't this a strong argument in favour of nurture, in the nature versus nurture debate? The fact is that in all the cases of feral kids, the much celebrated instinctive attraction was never observed. Doesn't this put to question all that we consider as the distinctive elements of human nature? Not only that, in cases where other people took efforts to integrate them with human society, the acute discomfort was writ large in all their reactions. Even in the light of this, why do we let modern science give too much weight to the nature side of the argument? Aren't we, in effect, rationalizing racism? In a study focusing on the role of education in social mobility within the context of class structure, American Journal of Sociology, Hiroshi Ishida et al., the affinity of children from well-placed families for better positions in life, and the indifference expressed exactly for the same by those from the fringes of society, was examined. The study found that what influenced the children consisted of both an unequal access to education for children of different class origins, 2 forms of educational advantage to children of professional and managerial class, a better access to higher levels of education and an avoidance of lower levels, and a natural attraction to well-placed positions from children of upper-class parents. 2 forms of advantage here also. Wards of highly qualified people have better access to professional and managerial positions, and they also may be adapted naturally to avoidance of manual positions. Isn't all this strong enough to tilt the debate completely in favour of nurture? Nurture children of the lower class to partake, appreciate and enjoy good things in life while instilling revulsion to the ordinary. Won't doing so result in enhanced opportunities for all social transactions, making things like GDP shoot up, leading to better standards of living? Many of the hottest issues of human nature and its variations, like the existence of a gay gene, which explains such behaviour, now deserves a relook. Also, the propensity to justify many abnormal things, like criminal acts, the tendency to divorce, or aggressive behaviour causing abuse, by the argument of behavioural genes, could then be put to rest. Chapter 61. Shouldn't we have thresholds in life? Shouldn't we have a threshold for everything in life? And the threshold, more important than the thing. Threshold is threshold, which refers to the part of the floor at the entrance to a room or building, signifies the beginning of something. This is quite a popular, useful concept in engineering, which enables one to make appropriate decisions regarding the health of a system as well as that of each of its components, just by observing system performance. It can be thought of as the value of a certain parameter of the component in question, beyond which it behaves in the predicted manner, and below which it doesn't. For example, current threshold, the minimum current level which produces a given effect, result, or response, such as detection, activation, or operation. For example, the lowest current needed to sustain lacing action in a diode laser. Sound threshold, the minimum sound pressure level necessary to be detected by human ears. Frequency threshold, the minimum or maximum frequency which produces a given effect, result, or response, such as detection, activation, or operation. For example, each of the cutoff frequencies of a filter, amplifier, or waveguide, which marks the regions of satisfactory functioning, linear range. In fact, the successful working of any physical system or component, be it a mechanical device, an electronic circuit, or some such arrangement, depends greatly on the correct selection of threshold for each of its component systems, devices, or both. What can it do to life? But this concept is not at all popular in the affairs of life and living, where it could have defined a boundary for all our considerations, affecting us in more than one way. As a parameter, the threshold could have marked the point which demarcates a change as radical or otherwise. A change beyond this could become a radically different one, and one within this could be accepted as part of the normal. This could have greatly altered our reactions to things that lead us to a change in our stance. That could have given us new ideas about good or bad, acceptable or unacceptable, healthy or sick, right or wrong, and other mutually exclusive parameters, thereby altering the single most significant source of social unrest. Or, it could have helped us in prescribing new rules of conduct, which are more conducive to social tranquility. What change can it bring? Let us study a few instances of human interaction and see how threshold can aid us. Take meekness or submissive nature. Our appreciation of humility is dependent on many variables. For those who belong to the lower strata of society, or who are in occupations of lesser income, such a temperament does not make any addition to their value. In fact, for such people, the consideration accorded by society is in direct proportion to the importance each one accord for oneself. Those who behave in a submissive manner will get treated also accordingly, whereas, for those who belong to the upper strata of society, submissive behavior acts like an ornament. It enhances their value, and, the higher one's position is, the worthier a meek disposition becomes. Thus, one's status can be thought of as a threshold, both while choosing to assume a meek personality and for acting high and mighty. Not only that, as one can easily see, both the options, i.e., adorning a humble disposition when poor, or presenting a proud visage when rich, are equally counterproductive. It already exists. In fact, the ideas of a threshold already exist in our daily activities. Each of us normally shall feel the need of satisfying our hunger, rest or relaxation only when the corresponding urge crosses certain level, unique to each. Or, one sharpness of reactions can cross the limits of tolerance when reactions experienced cross certain limits, again, unique to each. In which case what we have is, those low in threshold are identified as short-tempered. So also for all our behavioral states, like becoming happy, sad, and others. In all such circumstances, the trigger differs for each. The threshold can be considered as the unique element that demarcates each one's personality, like jovial, low threshold of elation, carefree, low threshold of cavalier feeling, etc. What good awaits us? Presently we identify at least a few emotions as negative, tolerating those as we have no other go. Negative emotions like anger, neglect, etc. can be of use if appropriately placed. For, many a time, it has been observed that a bit of anger by the right people was all that was needed to prevent a serious crime from taking place. from what we have discussed earlier, by accommodating these emotions as rightful part of human nature and specifying the parameter, threshold, as the entity to be held in check, we can bring all these to the mainstream, rather than relegated to the background as undesirable elements of human behavior. These will become an established part of human transactions. That will relieve the human society of much disturbance, as there will be no need to grapple with far too many activities we term now as antisocial. No feeling will be a pariah if it is within the threshold, and all will be thus if it is beyond. Easier life and a better world. Chapter 62. Some theories of how we became human, and why none of them need be correct. Are we killers, hippies, tool makers, chefs? What a piece of work is a man. Everyone agrees on that much. But what exactly is it about Homo sapiens that make us unique among animals, let alone apes? And when and how did our ancestors acquire that certain something? The past century has seen a profusion of theories. Some reveal as much about the time their proponents lived in as they do about human evolution. The modernity of humans, in fact, what separates them from all other forms of life, is thought to be connected with a sudden cultural revolution that took place around 40,000 years ago. It is hard to define cultural modernity exactly, and we may even have doubts about reaching a consensus as to the meaning of the concept. However, we can be certain that applying the criteria used up to now shows that there is no match between biological and cultural evolution, or, in other words, the features of cultural modernity cannot be seen as a direct consequence of the biological origin of our species. Let us examine the ideas in vogue. 1. We make tools. It is in making tools that man is unique, is it? Apes use found objects as tools, and then we took the shaping of sticks and stones to particular uses was the first recognizably human activity. But some other researchers have since shown chimps also shape sticks for particular uses, stripping them of their leaves. For instance, fish for underground insects. Even crows, which lack hands, are pretty handy when it comes to improvising. 2. We're killers. According to some anthropologists, our predecessors differed from living apes in being confirmed killers, carnivorous creatures that seized living quarries by violence, battered them to death, tore apart their broken bodies, dismembered them limb from limb, slaking their ravenous thirst with the hot blood of victims and greedily devouring livid writhing flesh. Thus came the killer ape theory of human evolution. 3. We share food. In the 1960s, the killer ape gave way to the hippie ape. Anthropologists unearthed evidence of animal carcasses that had been purposefully moved from the sites of their deaths to locations where, presumably, the meat could be shared with the whole commune. As they saw it, food sharing led to the need to share information about where food could be found, and thus to the development of language and other distinctively human social behaviors. 4. We swim in the nude. Another idea claimed that humans are so different from other primates because our ancestors evolved in a different environment near and in the water. Shedding body hair made them faster swimmers, while standing upright enabled them to wade. The aquatic ape hypothesis is widely dismissed, however. 5. We throw stuff. The idea that our ancestors began to man up when they developed the ability to hurl stones at high velocities took shape. Stoning animals also socialized us, because it required a group effort to be successful. 6. We hunt. Hunting did much more than inspire cooperation, anthropologists say. In a very real sense, our intellect, interests, emotions and basic social life all are evolutionary products of the success of the hunting adaptation. Our larger brains, for instance, developed out of the need to store more information about where and when to find game. Hunting also allegedly led to a division of labor between the sexes, with women doing the foraging. Which raises the question, why do women have big brains too? 7. We trade food for sex, more specifically, monogamous sex. The crucial turning point in human evolution, according to a theory, was the emergence of monogamy 6 million years ago. Until then, British alpha males who drove off rival suitors had the most sex. Monogamous females, however, favoured males who were most adept at providing food and sticking around to help raise junior. Our ancestors began walking upright, because it freed up their hands and allowed them to carry home more groceries. 8. wheat, cooked meat. Big brains or hungry grey matter requires 20 times more energy than muscle does. They could never have evolved on a vegetarian diet, some researchers claim. Instead, our brains grew only once we started eating meat, a food source rich in protein and fat, around 2 to 3 million years ago. And once our ancestors invented cooking, a uniquely human behavior that makes food easier to digest, they wasted less energy chewing or pounding meat and so had even more energy available for their brains. Eventually those brains grew large enough to make the conscious decision to become vegan. 9. Wheat, cooked, carbs, or maybe your bigger brains were made possible by carb loading. According to a recent paper, once our ancestors had invented cooking, tubers and other starchy plants became an excellent source of brain food, more readily available than meat. An enzyme in our saliva called amylase helps break down carbohydrates into the glucose the brain needs, fueling the explosive growth of the human brain. 10. We walk on 2 feet. Did the crucial turning point in human evolution occur when our ancestors descended from the trees and started walking upright? Proponents of the savanna hypothesis say climate change drove the adaptation. As Africa became drier around 3 million years ago, the forests shrank and savannas came to dominate the landscape. That favored primates who could stand up and see above the tall grasses to watch for predators, and who could travel more efficiently across the open landscape, where food and water sources were far apart. 11. We adapt. Human evolution was influenced by multiple changes in climate rather than a single trend. The emergence of the Homo lineage nearly 3 million years ago coincided with drastic fluctuations between wet and dry climates. Natural selection favored primates that could cope with constant, unpredictable change. Adaptability itself is the defining characteristic of humans. 12. We unite and conquer. This is a vision of human origins well suited to our globalized age. We are the ultimate invasive species. After tens of thousands of years confined to a single continent, our ancestors colonized the globe. They accomplished this feat by a genetic predisposition to cooperate born not from altruism but from conflict. Primate groups that cooperated gained a competitive edge over rival groups, and their genes survived. So what's wrong with all these theories? Many of them have merit, but they are at a loss when it comes to the question, what caused its appearance among humans? These theories also share a bias, the idea that humanity can be defined by a single well-defined trait or group of traits, and that a single stage in evolution was a crucial turning point on the inevitable road to Homo sapiens, which discounts the possibility of continued evolution. Or is it that the idea of a defining turn on the inevitable road to Homo sapiens is a possibility, but there will be something other than what was shown above? I am of the opinion that there has to be a driving force behind evolution, just as there is something to promote whatever life does. That hunger promotes eating, fear promotes shelter, etc., can be examples to this. We need to look for a driving force, which will be the one responsible for making us behave the way we behave.